Welcome to the world of Arthur Schopenhauer, a man who saw life as suffering, human desire as a prison, and women as, well, let's just say he wasn't their biggest fan. Let's break down his brutally honest, deeply controversial, and unapologetically cynical philosophy on men and women. Women, weaker by nature. Schopenhauer was not one to sugarcoat his opinions. He claimed that women were weaker than men in almost every way, physically, intellectually, and morally. For him, women lacked the capacity for deep, abstract thought. Their intellectual pursuits, he argued, were limited to the practical nurturing and surviving rather than the profound musings of philosophers or scientists. He believed that women were governed more by emotion than reason, instinct over logic, and when it came to their contributions to society, Schopenhauer saw women's role as secondary. They were, in his eyes, charming yet superficial beings whose primary function was reproduction. In his own words, Schopenhauer wrote, "Women remain children their whole life. They never see anything except what is closest to them. Cleave to the present moment. Take the appearance of a thing for reality." To him, a woman's beauty was a trap, a facade designed to lure men into their own personal prison. Women's place. Mothers, not thinkers. Schopenhauer's view of women went beyond just intellect. He believed women were, by nature, designed for one thing: reproduction. This biological purpose, he claimed, was their sole role in the grand order of things. As such, women's contributions to fields like politics, philosophy, or science were deemed irrelevant. To Schopenhauer, intellectual discourse was a space solely for men. He saw the presence of women in these areas as a threat, one that could degrade the quality of leadership and thought. For him, the domestic sphere was the only place women belonged, and obedience was the natural order. This was a radical perspective for his time, one that starkly rejected emerging notions of gender equality. The truth about love, a beautiful lie. Forget romance as we know it. To Schopenhauer, love was nothing but nature's cruel trick. It wasn't a divine force or a profound connection between two souls. It was a biological strategy designed to ensure reproduction. Men, in his philosophy, were victims of this illusion. They sought love, marriage, and companionship, only to realize that they were entrapped in an eternal cycle of sacrifice. Marriage, according to Schopenhauer, wasn't a sacred bond. It was a raw deal where men gave up their freedom, their wealth, and their mental peace for the sake of an illusion. He wrote, "Marriage is a trap set by nature, the will to live, wrapped in a sugar-coated illusion." Schopenhauer believed that men who fell for this illusion were destined to regret their decisions and fall prey to the manipulative forces of love. Women, masters of manipulation. In Schopenhauer's worldview, women weren't simply weak, they were also deeply manipulative. Lacking the physical strength and intellectual capacity that men possessed, Schopenhauer argued women compensated by honing their emotional intelligence, charm, and cunning. They were not necessarily bound by reason or logic, instead they wielded emotional appeal as their most potent weapon. For Schopenhauer, the essence of a woman's power lay in her beauty and the way she used it. He believed that women's charm, coupled with their ability to play on emotions, gave them an unparalleled influence over men. Rather than loving men for their virtues or intellectual qualities, Schopenhauer contended that women were primarily interested in men's utility, what they could provide in terms of resources, security, and status. To him, the survival of women was deeply intertwined with their ability to manipulate the desires and emotions of men to their advantage. Schopenhauer's philosophy paints a bleak picture of human relationships. Men were builders of society, scientists, soldiers, architects, and thinkers, while women, in his view, shaped the world in more subtle, indirect ways. Their strength was not in physical labor or intellectual contributions, but in the art of persuasion and influence. They seduced, manipulated, and played the game of attraction with unparalleled finesse, controlling the very men who were shaping history. In Schopenhauer's eyes, women were social tacticians, experts in using their allure to extract what they needed, often from powerful men. Their power did not lie in direct action, but in the realm of psychological influence. This view, harsh and controversial as it may be, remains a fascinating lens through which to explore human dynamics, power structures, and the complex interplay between attraction and control. Men, the rational, logical builders of civilization. Schopenhauer reserved his highest admiration for men whom he regarded as the true rational thinkers and architects of civilization. Men were, in his philosophy, the creators of history. They were the pioneers in science, art, politics, and innovation. Men, in Schopenhauer's eyes, were the ones who shaped the world with reason, discipline, and intellectual rigor. Men were builders and creators, the ones who shaped the future through direct, actionable contributions. Unlike women, who were viewed as more emotional and instinct-driven, men were seen as the rational, logical force behind every significant achievement in civilization. From the rise of empires to the development of scientific breakthroughs, Schopenhauer believed it was men who moved humanity forward. However, despite their superiority in these realms, Schopenhauer argued that men were far from perfect. Their greatness, while undeniable, was undermined by a deep flaw: desire. In Schopenhauer's world, desire was both a motivating force and a source of tragic vulnerability. Men's drive for success and power might be noble, but their weakness lay in their desire for something more primal: the pursuit of women. The tragedy of men, slaves to desire. Despite their intellect, power, and influence, Schopenhauer believed that men were ultimately slaves to their desires. While men could master the physical world and develop brilliant ideas, they were often helpless when it came to their emotional and sexual impulses. According to Schopenhauer, their greatest weakness wasn't their physicality, their minds, or their actions, it was their attraction to women. Schopenhauer viewed the pursuit of love and beauty as an unfortunate, nearly inevitable trap for men. He believed that men were willing to sacrifice everything: wealth, peace of mind, intellectual clarity, and personal autonomy in their quest to chase after women. The allure of romantic or sexual desire clouded men's judgment and often led them into compromising situations, where they would ultimately find themselves trapped in emotional entanglements and unfulfilling relationships. To Schopenhauer, marriage was the ultimate example of this tragic flaw. It wasn't a sacred union, it was a prison of desires that men willingly entered, only to regret it later. He argued that marriage, which many viewed as a social contract or fulfillment of love, was nothing more than a form of self-sacrifice. Men sacrificed their freedom, their wealth, and their mental peace, all in the name of a biological imperative that had nothing to do with true love or lasting happiness. In this bleak view, men were like pawns in a game they could never win, lured by the illusion of love, only to find themselves trapped in cycles of desire and regret. Schopenhauer pitied men who allowed themselves to be consumed by these desires, seeing them as victims of nature's deception. The ideal man, the ascetic philosopher. What then was the solution to this bleak view of existence? Schopenhauer's answer was simple: renounce it all. The highest form of man, he argued, was the ascetic philosopher. This was a person who rejected the distractions of the world, including love, fame, and wealth. Instead, the ideal man would dedicate himself to wisdom, intellectual pursuits, and solitude. Figures like Buddha, the Stoic philosophers, and the great thinkers of history were examples of this ideal. These were men who liberated themselves from the shackles of desire, choosing wisdom over worldly pursuits. To Schopenhauer, the philosopher who chose solitude was the true victor. He didn't fall prey to the illusions of love or fame, but instead found freedom in intellectual contemplation and self-mastery. A philosophy for the brave? Schopenhauer's views are undeniably extreme and controversial. Today, they are largely condemned as misogynistic and outdated. However, his philosophy forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Is love merely a biological trick, as he claimed? Do emotions cloud our judgment and hinder our ability to think rationally? Can true greatness only be achieved in solitude, free from worldly distractions? Regardless of where you stand on his ideas, Schopenhauer's philosophy remains a ruthless exploration of the human condition, one that challenges us to consider the balance between desire, intellect, and human nature. So, what do you think? Was Schopenhauer a visionary who saw the harsh truths of existence, or simply a bitter man whose personal grievances shaped his philosophy? Let's discuss in the comments.